A proposed rule change from the U.S. Postal Service is raising concerns about the future of mail-in voting across the country. The plan would require states to share voter lists with the federal government and could create new requirements for election officials, among other things. Reporter Diane Nissenbaum with the nonprofit news organization VoteBeat is joining us to talk more about this proposal. Diane, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, this all goes back to that executive order from the president. First, remind our viewers what exactly the president ordered.
All right, this was an executive order that came out in March, and he is directing the Postal Service to essentially create national voter lists. The Department of Homeland Security is also involved in this, but the U.S. Postal Service last week issued these new proposed rules that takes the first step in trying to implement this executive order, which the president issued in an effort to address his concerns about voter fraud in federal elections.
Talk to us about the rules. There's several points, right, in this proposed rulemaking from the post office, but tell us the high points here. What all is included in this proposal?
Yeah, the thing that stands out to me is the first thing that you mentioned, is that it requires states to submit lists to the Postal Service of everybody that's requested an absentee ballot. They have to submit that 60 days before an election. And then if you're not on that list, then the Postal Service can reject sending you an absentee ballot. So it means that if you're not on the list, then you're not able to vote absentee in your state. This can conflict with state laws that have much shorter deadlines for requesting an absentee ballot. If you have to go out of the state a month before the election and request it, you wouldn't be able to get an absentee ballot under this proposal. The other element of this that's raised concerns for elections officials is the issue you talked about, is it requires sort of uniform federal standards for what each ballot would look like. So it would have to have a special barcode going to the voter, and then a special barcode when the voter sends the ballot back to the elections officials. And this is creating all sorts of concerns for smaller counties, rural counties that don't have the ability even to create these barcodes with their current contractors, and also costs, because there's no federal money provided for states and counties to enact these changes.
Yeah, and something that I really want to point out from your reporting, we're talking about if a person is not on this list that was sent, the post office holding your ballot and not sending it to you would be what could happen. Obviously, this is also raising a lot of legal questions, because we know that the elections are a state duty, not a federal duty. Talk to us about some of the legal challenges and the legal questions about these proposed rules.
Exactly. That's sort of the overriding issue here, is that, the Constitution gives Congress and the states the power to regulate elections, not the president. And this has sort of been at the heart of the debate as the president has tried to impose more federal control over elections. There was actually just a hearing in Boston yesterday with the ACLU and a League of Women Voters and a bunch of states that are challenging this election order. And it did appear that the judge was concerned about this, especially as it comes to the upcoming November election, because the timeline is so short here. There's going to be a 30-day comment period before this even moves forward. And, the timelines are running on all of these proposals. So it faces a lot of hurdles being enacted from a constitutional perspective, and also just from a practical perspective.
Right, as to how you can get all of this done. Well, reporter Diane Nissenbaum is with VoteBeat. We thank you again for taking some time out to talk with us. Of course, you can check out his story at votebeat.org.